Chapter 17, Orders to Move. The year drew to a close. No instructions came from Wakura. Anxiously, Nobuo spent his first New Year in Sapporo, but could not enjoy himself with Mihori's problem on his mind. If there really is a God, he should have answered my prayers, but many times this thought passed through his mind. The New Year holiday ended. Wakura did not change at all and said nothing. Nobuo became increasingly uneasy. More days passed, and he began to think that his going with Mihori might have been a mistake. Maybe his calling at Wakura's home, not so long after he had refused Misa, had been tactless. He had gone knowing full well that it would be a difficult visit to make, but how Wakura had received it he did not know. He had pressed on and included himself in the apology with Mihori and his mother. He now thought regretfully, but perhaps it would have been better for the two of them to have gone alone. About 2 weeks later, when he came to work in the morning, the men in the office seemed strangely unsettled. They were all whispering together. For an instant, Nobuo thought that Mihori had been forgiven, and his heart leaped. "They've promoted the chief to Asahikawa. It's a pity, isn't it?" The man next to him whispered to Nobuo. "What, Mr. Wakura's going?" Nobuo could not believe his ears. It was not that he did not expect Wakura to be promoted someday and move elsewhere. Such a man, so popular with his superiors and juniors alike, could not possibly remain always in Sapporo. So it was not the fact that he was being moved that startled Nobuo. But if Wakura left Sapporo, what hope was there of Mihori regaining his position? It was a disappointing shock. "Look, you'd better stop bowing and scraping and get off home. It will be worse for you if you don't." Surely those had been Wakura's words that morning? But had he simply been evading the issue? Nobuo wondered, looking absent-mindedly out of the window. Big flakes of snow were falling without a sound. He felt desolate. That such a man as Wakura should fight shy of a decision made Nobuo feel wretched. "Our prayers are not answered as easily as that," he concluded sadly, and left his work untouched. Reinosuke Wakura seemed very busy and spent no time at his desk that day. The morning's snow had ceased falling and Nobuo was preparing to go home when Wakura tapped him on the shoulder. With a look, he indicated that Nobuo should follow him into the conference room. "Well, they've decided on Asahikawa at last," said Wakura as he sat down on a chair. "Congratulations." Nobuo bowed a little stiffly. "A sinecure for an old man who's finished, they might say. Asahikawa is cold and not a very welcoming place, but that can't be helped." Having said this, Wakura said no more. Nobuo did not speak either. Wakura's silence continued. Nobuo fancied he knew what Wakura was thinking about. He was going to say that there was not time to do anything about Mihori, and there was no more that could be done. Nobuo also remained silent. "Sit down, this is your first winter, isn't it?" Wakura spoke casually, so he was thinking of Nobuo after all. "Yes. You find it cold?" "No, it has not been as cold as I thought it would be yet." For the second time, Wakura's speech tailed off. "Do you have something for me to do?" "Yes, I have. 2 big jobs." Wakura smiled broadly. "What are they?" "Nagano, you are an amazing person. First of all, you turned down my daughter Misa, who is a strong girl and would probably bear you, I don't know how many children, to wait for some girl who may never recover. That's surprising enough in itself, but then you go and surprise me again. You, a man of samurai stock, prostrating yourself on my front step, pleading for that half-baked Mihori, and on top of that saying that you would leave your job if he did, you completely astonish me." Wakura gazed intently at him, and Nobuo looked down. "Just to look at your face, you seem mild enough. I've known a lot of men, but it's the first time I've met anyone like you. I've never thought of anyone as frightening before, but, deep down I think I'm scared of you. And to answer the request of such a frightening man, I've been busying myself a little. Nagano, Mihori is going with me to Asahikawa." "What, to Asahikawa?" "Yes, it would be hard on the fellow to have to work here, wouldn't it? I'll take him to Asahikawa and straighten him out there. The order for him to move has been issued." Wakura took a rolled-up document from his pocket and thumped it down on the table. Nobuo instinctively rose to his feet and made a deep bow. Thank you very much." He bowed deeply again. "Wait a bit. It's too early to start thanking me yet. As a matter of fact, I'm generally a good loser, but this time things are going to be different. It would be a pity to leave you behind. One doesn't meet a junior like you more than once in a lifetime. I'd like you to come with me to Asahikawa. What about it?" Nobuo could not reply. "You know, you have a responsibility for Mihori. I don't like to remind you, but after what you have said, I have a feeling you yourself ought to keep an eye on him. Think about it, will you?" Nobuo nodded. "Dear mother, I am sorry not to have written for so long. I hope you and Machiko and her husband are still well. I'm writing this letter at the upstairs window of my lodging house, looking out over roofs piled with snow. The roof of this house is piled high with it too. Mother, the daffodils will be blooming in the garden in Tokyo now. I think how amazing that is when I gaze at the streets of Sapporo, all white with snow. But of course, it is just the normal thing for the people of Tokyo to spend their winter without snow, while the people of Hokkaido have to bear the cold. I can't help pitying them. Up here, when it gets really cold, things are frozen up. The edges of your quilt get stiff with frost, and the glass in the windows is frozen over with beautiful white patterns like fern leaves or peacock feathers. And sometimes there are spiral patterns, an endless variety which I don't know how to describe. They are so beautiful. Maybe it's because I'm young, but I enjoy even really cold days and snowstorms. Walking about bent double in a raging snowstorm really gives you a sense of being alive. On days when the cold stings like a knife, I feel a sort of heightened pleasure. Mother, now I've come to Hokkaido and faced the winter here, I'm glad I came. There may be pleasure in looking at cherry blossoms under a beautiful blue sky, but when all one's body and spirit are nerved to face the fierce cold, maybe there is an even greater pleasure. Perhaps next winter I shall have gone to an even colder place still, Asahikawa. At this point, Nobuo laid down his pen and put some logs in the stove. He could hear the high-pitched ringing of the sleigh bells as a horse-drawn sledge passed by the house. For a little while he worked out how he would announce the news about Mihori. When Reinosuke Wakura had urged him, Nobuo had acquiesced immediately. "Mr. Nagano, you are a really surprising person," Wakura said with a note of admiration and amazement in his voice. "Regardless of what it may cost you, you are going as far as Asahikawa just for the sake of Mihori." Nobuo sat for a little, looking at the thick icicles which hung in front of his window, and then took up his pen again. "Mother, I've changed since I came to Hokkaido. Every day I think about Christ. For some reason, I could not help hating the fact that you were a Christian, Mother. But, in spite of that, I have decided to go to cold Asahikawa in order to help a man in obedience to Christ's teaching. Yet as the days pass, the resolve that I have made seems to be in danger of wavering. Mother, please pray that I may become a good Christian. I ask you earnestly to take care of yourself and give my best regards to Kishimoto and Machiko." When he reread his letter and put it into the envelope, Nobuo had a sudden wish that he could get in with it and return to Tokyo. In a few days, the letter would be taken through the gate of his own home in his own city and find its way into his mother's kind hands. The thought gave him a longing to be there. The mental image of her, opening the letter with scissors and running her eyes over what he had written, flashed through his mind. Nobuo blew a puff of breath into the envelope and sealed it. By April, the snow had melted, and soon May, the month of cherry blossoms, had passed. It was now June, the season of lilac and acacia, but for some reason or other, there was no further word of Nobuo's move to Asahikawa. Maybe Mr. Wakura, thinking sympathetically about Fujiko, had postponed the move. Nobuo thought thankfully, but it was strange that no order for his transfer had been issued. Meanwhile, he was very thankful that he had not had to go. Each week, without fail, he visited Fujiko, and they would read the Bible and pray together. Even though Nobuo did not express his feelings towards her, they soon found a deep mutual understanding. Nobuo thought of the times he spent with Fujiko as the most satisfying he had known. He would talk to her about the scenery outside or things that had happened in the streets, and Fujiko always listened with genuine happiness. And when he visited her, whatever he brought as a present, even if it were a single dandelion plucked from the roadside, Fujiko's whole face would light up with joy. "Mr. Nagano, I can imagine quite clearly the place where you picked that dandelion. It was in a quiet street in front of a big Western-style building, and near it there was a willow tree and a little girl playing with some red jackstones. That was where you picked it, wasn't it, Mr. Nagano? And you picked it for me. Even a single very ordinary dandelion could bring a variety of scenes to Fujiko's mind, though she had not left her bed for several years. But more than that, she always brought a peculiar delight to Nobuo, who had done it to please her. He valued her sweetness and kindness more and more. Fujiko had a gift for receiving other people's courtesies so graciously. However small the gift, with her inexhaustible imagination she created a child's story or a poem about it. When he brought her apples and tangerines, Fujiko would take them in her hands and gaze raptly at them. "Look, Mr. Nagano, it's God who has created such beautiful colors. I would love to see God's paint box," she would say with innocent happiness. "I wonder how many different colors he has?" She was so joyful that the people who came to see her became cheerful too. Nobuo found himself wanting to show everything he saw to Fujiko, especially the evening sun sinking behind the mountains and the rows of acacia trees. Just from imagining how happy she would be to see them, Nobuo had the feeling that she was with him. In this way, visiting Fujiko and telling her about everything became a great joy and comfort to him. Only one thing distressed him more and more: the question of when he would be moved to Asahikawa. The order for his transfer finally came at the beginning of September. It was a morning when the cosmos flowers were tossing in the wind that he first got the news. Although he had been prepared for it, he was depressed and even annoyed. Wakura knew about Fujiko's illness and had a daughter himself, so he must have been able to understand something of Fujiko's sad position. Moreover, Nobuo suspected that if he left Fujiko and went to Asahikawa, Wakura would try to bring him and Misa together again. Nobuo had not forgotten the verses of scripture that he had read, nor his decision to be a true friend and neighbor to Mihori. But, if the truth were known, he felt that rather than go to Asahikawa for the sake of Mihori, who was well, there was a greater need to be a good neighbor to Fujiko, who was ill. Because he had apologized for him, Mihori had escaped losing his job, and Nobuo felt that he had done enough. That same day, with his mind still unsettled, Nobuo went straight to Fujiko's house. Seeing Yoshikawa, who had a day off, Nobuo gave way to his feelings. "Yoshikawa, I've been transferred," he said as soon as he entered the guest room. "Transferred? Where?" Yoshikawa's face stiffened immediately, and he looked behind him in the direction of Fujiko's room. "It's Asahikawa. Asahikawa? But you've only been a year in the company." "Yes, but, well, it can't be helped." Nobuo thought of telling Yoshikawa about Mihori, but felt that it would not be right to reveal everything to him. "Fancy, Asahikawa," Yoshikawa murmured, pressing down with his big hands on the knees of his crossed legs. Yoshikawa's mother, who had put her head out from the kitchen when she heard that Nobuo was moving, began to sob. "Well, what shall we do? What shall we do now?" Seeing the agitation of both Yoshikawa and his mother, Nobuo himself became uneasy. If the two of them could be so sad about it, what would Fujiko be like? He thought dejectedly. For a year, Fujiko had been making steady progress, and he was afraid that to announce his transfer to someone in her state would not only be very cruel, but might affect her health. "Well, it can't be helped," Yoshikawa said. "Meeting and parting, it's all part of life. We can't ignore the strict rules of the railroad. But Nobuo, you tell Fujiko, please. I'll stay in here." Yoshikawa seemed lacking in resolution, unlike his usual self. His mother also sank to the floor and sat without moving. There was nothing else he could do. Nobuo went to Fujiko's room. "Come in. You're welcome. Do you know what happened today? A dragonfly flew into the room. It made me very happy." Seeing Fujiko's face so bright that it almost shone, Nobuo became even more downcast. How many times had he visited her, flat on her back in this room, he wondered. But no matter how often, he had never found Fujiko out of sorts. Probably it would be safe after all to tell her everything. Pulling himself together with an effort, Nobuo sat down by her bedside. "Fujiko." At the sound of his formal tone, she turned her frank eyes on him with a questioning look. When he saw them, Nobuo found himself unable to speak. He searched for words which somehow would not startle or sadden her. "What's happened? You look as if you've got a difficult problem." "Yes, it's a very difficult one, Fujiko." Without thinking, he took her hand. The hand was so soft that it almost seemed to melt as he grasped it. He felt he could sense Fujiko's weakly flickering life and almost choked with emotion. If he told her about his transfer, it could well be that that hand would lose all power to live, he thought as he held it tenderly. What's the matter? There's something different about you today. Fujiko, it's like this. Nobuo summoned up his courage and spoke. I've been transferred to Asahikawa. Asahikawa is close and I'll be able to visit you once or twice a month. Nobuo looked steadily at Fujiko's widely opened eyes as she realized what was happening. Quickly they filled with tears, which rolled down to her ears. She did not say a word, but softly pulled up the quilt as far as her chest, then until it hid her neck and finally covered her face. The quilt moved slightly as if Fujiko was weeping silently beneath it. The slender hand was hidden now. The thought of it brushing away her tears was like a great weight crushing Nobuo's chest. Minutes passed, they did not know how long. At last, Fujiko put her head out from under the quilt. Her eyes were still red with weeping, but she looked at Nobuo and broke into a smile. That's strange. I didn't think I had any tears. I wonder where they were hidden. From her smiling eyes, tears began to fall again. I must not forget to offer you my congratulations. After she had said this, her lips began to tremble uncontrollably, and she started to weep again. Nobuo wiped away his tears too. I always pray that God's will may be done, but sometimes when things happen according to his will, they are hard to bear, aren't they? Said Fujiko after some time. But Fujiko, it's not as if we were parting for life. I'll be able to see you every Sunday. Don't take it so hard. Thank you, but sooner or later you will forget all about me, Mr. Nagano. As far as you are concerned, that will be a good thing. Fujiko, don't say such a thing. I have not said what I feel in actual words, but I thought you understood. But, Mr. Nagano, you are well and strong. Well, this is a good opportunity, I'll tell you clearly. This is the truth, Fujiko. Almost as soon as I came to Sapporo, there was talk of my marrying the daughter of my superior, but I refused. I did that because of you. Fujiko looked at Nobuo in surprise, and he went on. I'm sure you are going to get better and then marry me. It may take a long time, but even if you never do, all my life I'll never marry anyone else. This was the first time Nobuo had been able to declare his love and intentions to Fujiko. As he did so, he renewed the vow in his heart not to marry anyone except this sweet but pitiful Fujiko. But I'm not worthy of such a... What do you mean you're not worthy? I am unworthy of you, with your beautiful nature. Nobuo sat up in a straight and formal position. Fujiko, will you be my life partner? Tears welled up in Fujiko's eyes again. I will not allow it. Mr. Nagano, you should marry someone who is strong. There's no need to feel sorry for me. Nobuo edged closer to Fujiko. As he wiped away her tears with his handkerchief, he spoke. Fujiko, do you think the most important part of a person is their body? I don't. I think the spirit is more important than the body. Thank you, but... I don't understand it, Nobuo said passionately, but it seems to me that the personality is the chief thing about anyone. Even if someone had no hands or eyes, if his spirit were a fine one, you could say he was a fine person. Don't reproach yourself for being ill. No one could imitate your sweet gentleness and sincerity. You make me very happy when you say things like that, but... What is it now? Why are you saying but again? Don't say but anymore. But... This time Nobuo leaned right over her and pressed his lips to her quivering ones. In a panic, Fujiko tried to push Nobuo off with both her hands. After a moment, Nobuo raised his head. Fujiko was pale and trembling. Her chest rose and fell as she gasped for breath. Fujiko, Nobuo spoke her name softly. Fujiko covered her face with both hands and said, Mr. Nagano, I have the lung disease. If it should pass to you. Fujiko's concern for his health was even greater than the happiness of being kissed. Don't worry. The sickness has almost left your lungs, hasn't it, Fujiko? If it were infectious, it would have reached Yoshikawa and me long ago, Nobuo smiled. The room had grown a little dark. Nobuo lit the lamp by her bed. The oil sputtered a little and the flame flickered. They gazed at each other silently. The window panes rattled in the wind. It's been a year, hasn't it? Fujiko broke the silence. You mean since I came to Sapporo? Yes, a year and 2 months, isn't it? Fujiko was thinking about something. What is it? Nothing. I was just thinking that all the happiness that I've had in the last 10 years is nothing to compare with the happiness of the last year and 2 months." And a smile lit up her face.